Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devyamatриksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishna Te Namaha Om Jananīṃ Sharanam Devīṃ Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Parapadme Tuyostritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamamashvaracharya Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Reva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Vedanta Veda Vedanga Vedanta Vidyastana Evacha Sri Ganesha Sharada Guru Vyo Namaha Hari Jai Ma Jai Ma. We can meet again to discuss the Devi Gita of the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. And we're in a very sweet section. Ma has appeared after thousands of years of tapasya of the gods, and she's appeared in an overwhelming way. We've spent weeks describing, months describing, first as a pillar of, as an infinite light, completely overwhelming them, then appearing in the beautiful form of Bhuvaneshwari. We spent a lot of time describing her iconographic meaning of her, the reading of her iconographic details. And so the gods pulled themselves together and began to recite prayers, not having the words, their voice choking, their mind overwhelmed, their tears, eyes filled with tears of love, as the verses described. They began to praise her with known hymns, right? With actually, and the first set of hymns is actually most of these hymns, maybe all the hymns of the whole section, have a Vedic pedigree, right? And so the verses we're on right now, the verse we'll discuss today is also a Vedic verse. The verse we did last week, Namo Devi Mahadevi Shivai Satam Namaha, Patatam Namaha. So that beautiful verse, many of us are familiar with it and recognize it from the Chandi, the Devi Mahatmyam, right? But that also is coming. I'm not quite sure if the Devi Mahatmya version, if it appears in the Devi Mahatmya before it appears in the Vedic collection that known as the Devi Upanishad, I don't know, but it's definitely it's a famous verse in the Puranas, in the Shakta Puranas, and again appears here. But here it's being directly quoted in the Devi Gita. It's being quoted as a selection from a Vedic hymn. We mentioned a little bit last week, the Devi Atharva Shirsha, Devi Atharva Shirsha, Vedic hymn, and Shirsha means crown. Somebody asked a question. Our friend Dan the Lion asked a question in the YouTube comments. What does Shirsha mean? Shirsha here means crown or head, right? So Devi Atharva Shirsha means it's like a jewel or a crown of the Atharva Veda, something like that, for the goddess. What I did mention is that there's also a Ganesha Atharva Shirsha, right? There's a hymn a Vedic hymn that we use, or that is used for worshiping Ganesha. If you look this up you can do a YouTube search on. I think I gave in our Google page a link to the Devi Atharva Shirsha, but you can also look up the Ganesha or it's called Ganapati Atharva Shirsha to hear the famous Ganesha Upanishadic text or Vedic text, right? So let's look at last week's verse. That you can see? Somebody, okay, good, sorry. Okay. This is the verse from last week. Namo Devye Mahadevye Shivaye Satam Namaha Nama Pakritye Bhadraye Niyataha Pranataha Smatam. We bow to the goddess, the great goddess, the Devi Mahadevi Shiva, We bow to Prakriti and Bhadra with care and attention and discipline. We have saluted you, or we bow to you. And we spent quite a bit of time describing ways, kind of esoteric ways of understanding this hymn. So then we move forward. So this verse, the tām-agni-varṇāṃ, is a very recognizable verse also. It's the next verse in the Devi Atharva Shirsha of the Atharva Veda, right? Those verses I mentioned last week, that most verse Atharva Shirsha, Devi Atharva Shirsha, of which this verse, the last two verses, one of them, this verse is one of them. It's from the Atharva Veda, but they're collection from verses from mostly from the Rig Veda, right? And so this is an example of this verse. You can also find in the Rig Vedic Upanishadic hymn called the Mahānārayana Upanishad. It is and Narayana Upanishad. The section that this cluster of verses from which this verse is taken is called the Durga Juṣṭām, the Vedic Durga Juṣṭām. So if you want to listen or look at the full Durga Juṣṭām, you can also look that up. It's readily available online. You know, the recordings actually will hear, because it's a Vedic verse. I wanted you to hear nice pronunciation with all the swaras. So in a second we can listen to a recording of it. It's the recording of the entire verse. I'll just play this one verse, so not to get too distracted, which is my tendency to start talking about verses that we're not supposed to be talking about and make things go too long. But so it's found in Upanishad, the Mahānārayana Upanishad. That means it's a Vedic verse. It has Vedic pedigree. So the question is, it starts tām-agni-varṇāṃ. Right, and so there is some controversy of who is the one being addressed, right? In the Mahānārayana Upanishad, mostly it's verses to the god of fire, is the most important god in the Vedic pantheon. We have Agni, we have Indra, we have Varuna. You know, these are very important deities. So some say, oh, this is actually these verses are actually to Agni. These verses, most of the Agni, right? Some say no. Some verses are to Agni, some verses are to Durga, Devi, and some verses are to Indra in the Mahānārayana Upanishad, right? So whatever it is, I think my tendency is to believe that this verse is to Durga, because the very first word is tām. Tām means her, not him. Not that. If it's that, it's female. That, I mean, it's her, right? So I think we're glorifying feminine quality. We bow. We'll assume, although I'm just saying that some traditions and some scholars hold that this verse is actually to Agni, and then Durga is a quality of Agni. We won't take it this way because this is definitely not the way it's taken in the Devi Gita. Here it's, I mean, the Divine Mother has appeared, right? And so she's being glorified, right? The goddess Bhuvaneshwari has appeared, so she's being glorified. We'll interpret this verse several ways to interpret it, but we'll take the stance that it's addressing Durga, as these are all epithets of the goddess Durga, not epithets and descriptions of Agni, even the feminine qualities of Agni, which some do. Tām-agni-varṇāṃ, this is my natural mispronunciation. Varṇāṃ. Tām-agni-varṇāṃ tapasā jvalantīṃ, vairovcanīṃ karmā-phaleṣu juṣṭām, durgāṃ devīṃ śaraṇamaham, śaraṇamaham, prapadye sutarasi tarase namaḥ. Okay. Please forgive the delay. Technical difficulties. So we mentioned who's the one being praised here. We'll assume it's Devi, because she's being, at least in this text, the way it's being used in the Devi Gita, it's definitely Ma Durga. It's definitely Devi, Supreme Devi is Bhuvaneshwari. And so the name we hear, the kind of the who's being focused on, Durgam Devīṃ, right? That God is Durga. Śaraṇamaham, I take shelter. Sharanam, shelter. Aham, I, right? Prapadye. Prapadye means at her feet, right? I take shelter of her feet. And my verses here. Falling at her feet, we could say, right? So she has many verses, I mean, many lines before this line that's setting up who it is that we're praying to. The first two lines is who is that Durga Devi, qualities of that Durga Devi, and the final line is why we're who. Then the final sutarasi, tarase, namaḥ. Why we're what's her nature? Tām-agni-varṇāṃ tapasā. We'll talk about that. And then Durga Devi, we take shelter, we bow. Why? That why is a sutarasi, tarase. We'll go to that. So let's start. Tām-agni-varṇāṃ. Tam, and so he's Professor Brown, Mackenzie Brown, says, to her the color, tam, to her, agni-varṇāṃ, the color of fire. So that's that's why I've used a picture. The picture we're using here is not of Durga. This is a modern rendition of Jwalamukhi, the goddess whose face is flames, right? And I collected it for my own meditation because we have a Duni, and I like to think of the Duni as the Devi who lives as the fire within my Duni, my fire, my sacred fire, the Sadhu sacred fire. One of her names is Jwalamukhi, so I have this picture in my own collection to meditate on her, which is actually perfect because this is who she is. So I'm using that picture, although it's a little different pose. It's not the same pose as Bhuvaneshwari in the previous verses, right? So Varnam, Tam Shi Agni Varnam. So Agni Varnam means, a simple meaning is the color of fire. Varnam means fire, right? And then tapasya means austerity. We've talked about this. The gods performed much austerity, right? Difficult austerities. Jvalantīṃ, shining, right? He puts blazing was ascetic power. Jwala, shining, blazing, burning, that type of meaning. So she's shining and blazing with tapas. Of course, tapa also just means heat, so the color of fire blazing with heat. But all the commentaries on this verse, and there are many because of its connection to the Durga juṣṭām, describe it as blazing with not just heat, as tapas means heat, like the color of fire that's hot and shining. That's one way you can think of it. But it's shining with not just tapas for heat, but ascetic heat, austerity. The power of austerity. She shines with austerity. So beautiful. They saw when she first appeared to them. That's why this verse is very appropriate. She appeared as an infinite light, right? Shining like 10 million suns, cooling like 10 million moons, tinged with 10 million streaks of lightning, tinged with red. Remember those beautiful verses, right? So this is a good description. She's like fire. She's shining with fire. It's a very appropriate description of the goddess, right? Right. I mentioned last week that we're using a little bit the interpretive hermeneutical stance of one Swami named Ishwarananda Giri in Mount Abu, living Pandit, saint, sage, teacher in Mount Abu in Gujarat. And he makes one point. He says actually he does not believe that this tām-agni-varṇāṃ means a color of fire. It means like fire, right? So that she is like fire, not the color of fire. And because my intuition, very limited Sanskrit and even less Vedic Sanskrit to say it's the color of fire, right? That's the obvious meaning. But I'll give you his justification. There's a term varana. Varana means to explain, an example, to show, something like this, right? And so so varana, it says varna, there's a term that says varna is one that by which varana explanation is done is called varna. So but the way of saying that the one Durga here is being described to have qualities like fire, not just that she's red or yellow or orange, the colors that we consider a fire. So taking to that may give a little bit of a hint of a way of understanding what are the qualities of fire that it's not just, it may mean not just describing that she's red or yellow or orange like fire, the color of fire, but has qualities that we use fire to explain. Like for instance, like light. The most obvious thing with fire is that it's full of light, or that it's and light, shining light for fire is very often an example. We use it in kind of mystical language to be like consciousness, right? And so fire is like consciousness, right? Or fire is energetic, it's powerful, right? Heat and energy, right? Right, and actually even the term agni, right, comes from a root, from my limited understanding of gum, and gum has two basic meanings. It means knowledge and it means action, right? So that understanding of agni, not just like you light a fire and it's that color, but what are those qualities of fire of being knowledge, jnana agni, right? And shakti, power, and action, the power to act, right? So jnana shakti, kriya shakti, you can think of it in kind of tantric language, right? So this could be a way of praising her, that she is the light, she is the fire of awareness, right? The jnana-agni. So there's a term also in kind of a this way of understanding these verses. There's a term called sambit. So sambit means awareness, means like a conscious awareness, and kind of unitive awareness, divine awareness, consciousness, the consciousness. So sambit agni is the fire of consciousness. So a lot of the commentaries that treat these verses the way we're going to be treating them will use that term sambit agni a lot, right? So we can be a little familiar with that. It's not in these verses, but in commentaries on these verses, sambit agni is very often used. Sambit, it's a fire of awareness. We can compare that. We find in the Lalita Sahasranama, there's in verse 1, I think verse 1, name 3 perhaps. This is Chidagnikunda Sambhuta, right? She exists in the fire, in the Chidagnikunda, in the fire pit, Agnikund, right? But what is the fire pit in Swami's backyard, in the fire pit where we pour ghee, in the fire pit, Chidagni, in the fire pit of awareness, of consciousness. So that's the same type of idea. And why fire is a very good description of consciousness, because it shines, it sees everywhere, right? Going to jump ahead a little bit in my notes because I think I wrote something about names of Agni. So if we think of other names of Agni, right? Like I said, like the gum and Agni is awareness and knowledge as well as action. There's other names of Agni. I think of the other famous names of Agni, right? Jataveda, that's one of Agni's names, right? Jataveda. So not think of these. These are the names of Agni, the Vedic deity. These are qualities that deity is associated with. Therefore, these are qualities describing who Durga is, right? What are her qualities, to use this type of thing. So these are the standard or the typical Vedic names and meditations and qualities of Agni, right? Jataveda. Jataveda means one who knows everything, sees in all directions. You can see fire. It's a beautiful image of omniscience, all-knowingness, because it shines not in one direction like a flashlight, it shines in all directions, and therefore knows everything. If light is a symbol of knowing, shining in all directions, sees everything. Fire faces everywhere. There's another word, pavaka, as another famous name for fire, or a word for fire, or a quality of fire. It means purifying. Right? Things are purified in fire. We put base metals are purified, right? And of impurities, right? And so we use the fire, and we even use, the fire purification, right? And we can see how that is connected. That can be connected to the idea of austerity also, right? We have the fire of purification. And then hutashana. Hutashana means that that which absorbs everything that's poured into it. Everything that it put into a fire gets consumed and absorbed, subsumed. Maybe that's the word. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. Subsumed into it, right? It sublimates. Maybe that's a more philosophical term. It sublimates all things that are offered into it. When you pour ghee into fire, it disappears into fire. It gets sublimated into fire, right? And so if we just take these three ideas of Jata Veda, shining everywhere, meaning omniscience, right? Awareness, right? Pavaka, purification, and hutashana, absorbing everything that's poured into it, that's put into it, right? Everything you put into fire becomes fire. If you put a piece of wood is very much not like fire, right? Fire is full of heat and light, and a piece of wood is cold and hard, right? And dark, right? But you put wood in fire, what happens? It becomes just like fire, right? Even you took metal into fire, it becomes just like fire. It becomes red and hot and emanates light. And, that's the idea of the hutasana. So let's look at the verse again with that in mind, right? Agnitam, so the quality, what are the fire, all-knowing, all purifying, absorbing everything that's offered into it, right? Tapasā, jvalantīṃ, she's shining, she's radiant, blazing with austerity, right? So that gives a clue into the nature of spiritual austerity. We've talked a lot about austerity. When the gods were doing difficult austerity, we talked about the Gita's version of austerity of mind, speech, and body, as ways to organize our own spiritual life, inspire our own spiritual life. Some austerity is required, but what's the real austerity? There's all kinds of mortifications that can be done, all kinds of privations that can be done, all sorts of practices that are not easy to do. But what's the real purpose? What's here? A hint is that it's jnana yajna or jnana tapasya, jnana sadhana. It's sadhana for spiritual knowledge, for gnosis, right? Or for purification. We purify ourselves in the fire. The Ma is like fire, right? And she shines with austerity, and also there are austerities which invoke her in the fire of austerity, the heat of austerity, for our purification, for our illumination, right? And we offer all of our karmas into her, right? Anything you pour into her, and like anything you put into a fire becomes fire, gets absorbed and sublimated in fire. Anything you put into her gets absorbed, right? And so this is another we call that in the Gita. There's this what is it? Palatyag. We give up the fruits of our work. Anything when you take rice, you take tām-agni and you pour it into the fire, right? Of course, anything you throw into the fire gets absorbed in the fire. Now you no longer have it. What does it become? It becomes fire. And when it becomes fire, right, it's the Shakti part of it gets immediately flames, and what's left is ash, right? It gets burnt up, right? The Shakti gets released like fire. The part that's like fire becomes fire, and what's left is simply ash, right? So she's like fire, knowledge, purification, just like those three examples: knowledge, wisdom, knowledge, omniscience, awareness, sambit, agni, purification and transformation, absorption, like this, purification, right? Shining was tapasya. Vairovcanīṃ, karmā-phaleṣu, juṣṭām. Okay, before I move on, I wanted a few the statement about tapasya. In the Upanishads, there's, let's see if I can, if I wrote down tapa. Please forgive me. Just now, I didn't write it down, and it's not fresh in my memory right now. Which Upanishad it's from? We've discussed it in one of our seminary courses. We went through verse by line through this meditation, so I have it in my notes somewhere, but it's not fresh in my mind. But the line is fresh in my mind. Tapasya Brahma Vijñāsva. Vijñāsava, right? By tapasya, Brahman is to be known, right? That's the line, right? A disciple or son goes to the guru, show me Brahman, and the guru says, do tapasya, because by tapasya, Brahman is known. Know Brahman through to tapas, right? To austerity. So the real purpose of tapas, from the Upanishadic tradition, the Sambit Agni tradition, is jnana, to get knowledge of an experience of this divine awareness, right? So this verse is about that, right? So vairovcanīṃ karmā-phaleṣu juṣṭām. So karmā-phaleṣu means the fruits of our work. The karma means act. In the Vedas, karma means Vedic action, it means ritual, right? We have in the Puranas, the Mahabharata, karma has not migrated but expanded its meaning to be all action, right? But in the early Vedic text, karma means ritual action, ritually prescribed action, right? Is karma. And so we'll take it first at that level as a statement about Vedic rites, right? That the purpose of Vedic rites, juṣṭām, is to please her, right? Right. And vairovcanīṃ is a name for the sun, right? It means also, I think he describes it as, as he put it, blazing like the sun with ascetic power. I like the sun. I think that's where he puts vairovcanīṃ, maybe is his, where he puts the sun. Vairovcanīṃ means beautiful, shining. It also means like it's another word for shining like the sun. It's a name for the sun, but a beautiful, like shining with beauty, something along those lines, right? So that Devi shining with ascetic, glorious ascetic power, knowledge, wisdom, purification, like this, is the purpose of the fruits of our actions. Why we do action. So let's take this first to why we do Vedic action, right? Or Vedically prescribed action. The purpose of Vedic rituals is knowledge, purification, transformation, absorption, right? These are the qualities of agni-varṇāṃ, right? So that is the way he translated, who is worshipped for attaining the fruits of action. The purpose of karmā-phala, to attain these fruits of this action, is this, and that's actually, perhaps if we take it a little bit more expansively than just Vedic action, by expanding what karma means in the kind of modern, medieval to modern period, as all action is karma. That may be the reason why we have all action. Everything we do is for that purpose, but we forget, right? We're not, everything we're doing, the fruit, the desired fruit of all our action is the qualities of the Divine Mother as agni-varṇāṃ, right? Jvalantīṃ, knowledge, purification, like this. This is what we're after, right? And in a more practical Hinduism, right, everything is done with fire as a symbol of that, right? When we get married, we do a fire. At a time of initiation, we have a fire. When we do puja, we light a lamp. If you do japa, you light a lamp, or you light a candle, and then you do a japa. If you start, I mean, in a traditional Hindu culture, if you have a meeting of some sort, you have a dance performance, first thing you do, you light a lamp. That lamp, the purpose of reminding us, perhaps, and some people have commented like this, the purpose of that lamp, right, is one sense it's Lakshmi, it's auspiciousness, it's the lamp. Agni is the witnesses everything, but it's also the purpose of all of the action, the purpose of our of initiation, of fire ceremonies, of japa, of a dance performance, is to please her, and therefore attain the qualities, the Agni-like qualities of knowledge and the like. Right. Even the Andyesti type rituals, these are even what the funeral rites are also done with fire, right? From the beginning rites and every important rite in Hinduism to the final rite, right, is done with fire, right? So let's think of this. This is the fire that can be awakened by tapasya, right? That's the purpose of austerity. It is awakened by, so we use this very harsh sounding word tapasya, right? Because that's this in this verse, right? But we can soften it and apply it practically as sadhana, right? This fire, this sambit agni, right, is awakened by sadhana, or this is the purpose of sadhana, is to awaken it, right? To awaken this fire, right? And of course, let's insert this verse, or notice where this verse is inserted in this text, right? The gods did thousands of years of austerity, all kinds of sadhana, and the list of sadhanas we discussed: japa, parayana, recitation, amba yajna, mental worship, nyasa, all these types of sadhanas, difficult sadhanas that they were doing, puruṣcharana. We talked about all these things, and the result, they did austerity, and their own awareness woke up, because Chidagni, Chidagni Kunda, the Chidagni, the fire of awareness, that or Sambit Agni, as we described here, this is the result. They in their own awareness, now she blazes. She's a fire, 10,000 suns, cooling like 10 million moons, 10 million moons like this, right? And then she takes on a form, but they now know what that form is. All the symbols, all the details of an iconography discussed over the last couple months are describing qualities of this awakened awareness, right? This awakened consciousness, right? That was awakened by austerity or by sadhana in the story, right? Of course, Sri Ramakrishna said there's different ways to awaken consciousness. One is by sadhana. This is the normal way, right? But another is by kripa, by grace, right? So there's also Ma sometimes just gives grace, but that also is a result of sadhana. We don't always know how it works, but even the desire to do sadhana is also an act of grace. And the results, and also sadhana is not like a purchasing. You do so many mantras, you get this result. You purify the mind, you purify your heart and consciousness, and focus with loving attention upon the goal, the spiritual goal, right? Then something within uncovers. That's another quality of fire. Agni-varṇāṃ, another quality of fire, is that fire in the Vedic understanding is everywhere, right? That everything fire, it's like they use, the fire is often used as an example of Brahman. So there's like verses in the Upanishads that say, like fire is everywhere, but manifested in wood, right? When you can bring it up, fire is all pervading. It's in everything, but in certain conditions, it manifests, right? So Brahman, or the Atman, or here in our text and our tradition, the Divine Mother, the Devi, is everywhere. She's in every particle and everything. She's all pervading like fire, right? But like fire also, she has to be ignited, right? She's everywhere, so there's nothing to do to get her, but she has to be by heating, by austerity, by sadhana, by practice, by sincerity, by devotion, she wakes up and she flames, right? She engulfs like this, right?
Well, Guruji?
Jata Veda, she.
Guruji?
Swamiji.
Oh, I just said that
I can't. Am I?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you, unfortunately. When I rebooted, my speakers didn't come back on. Let me try. I'm going to do please don't mind, as today's a glitchy day. I have to do a test to correct my Okay. Okay, we're back on tām-agni.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just in connection with all of this. Cauliflowers had posted a. She just said Buddha Shuddhi. Presumably, I'm thinking, that there's a connection, possible connection, and also Reverend Zoe asks, is the Gayatri and Surya every morning, is it her face? So it seems these questions seem connected to what you've just been describing.
Yeah, in Buddha, it was Buddha Shuddhi. Buddha Shuddhi is a meditation of the inner fire at the Chidagnikunda, the fire pit of consciousness. When we move into kind of a yogic / tantric map, right, or way of looking at it, then we have like Kundalini, and we visualize Kundalini as a fire or power at the base of the spine, right? Chidagnikunda means in the base of consciousness, at the very foundation of our consciousness, but we're a little bit physically oriented, right, neurologically set up to think this way. So we think of the base of our consciousness, the base of our being, to be the base of our body, right? So in the visualization of Buddha Shuddhi, we visualize the fire coming up, everything being offered into it and transformed by this divine fire, for sure, right? Because it says only, and the purpose of Buddha Shuddhi, it says only a deva can worship the deva, right? So we are removed, leaving only the samvid, that awareness, the pure awareness, only the awareness, the divine awareness is what realize the divine awareness, worship the divine awareness. So that, and to Reverend Zoe's perhaps point on facing the sun and chanting Gayatri as a morning sadhana, especially, right? So Gayatri is a prayer to the sun, right? And it's a prayer for light, right? Bhargo devasya dhīmahi means shining with divinity, right? Here in our verse could be tapasā jvalantīṃ, vairovcanīṃ, like shining with divinity, right? And people interpret the Gayatri in so many different ways, right? So in the Advaitic tradition, they give a completely Advaitic interpretation of Gayatri. That are one of our important spiritual teachers, His Holiness Swami Chidananda. He would always say that the sun represents the light of lights beyond all darkness. That was his line. When we pray to the sun, right, it's a light, but it's not this. That's not the real sun. The sun, just like our candle and our fire pit and our hibachi in the backyard, is not the real fire, right? That's not the fire that we're talking about. It represents the light of lights beyond all darkness, right? I like that line. It's good to remember when you pray to the Gayatri, when you pray to the sun, when you pray to the fire, when you pray to Devi, she's the light of lights beyond all darkness, right? And we're praying for light, right? Where to illuminate, the prayer is in the Gayatri, illuminate my consciousness, right? And again, that right? Means not only to, it has a double meaning, to illuminate and to stimulate. Like the term agni, I mentioned that the gum means both knowledge or illumination and action, stimulation. So you can see that even the sun and they're almost two sides of the samvid agni, of the fire of consciousness. It's both stimulating and awakening and pure awareness itself. One thing that this, let's look at the next line. Hold on. So tām-agni-varṇāṃ tapasā jvalantīṃ vairovcanīṃ karmā-phaleṣu juṣṭām durgāṃ devīṃ. So now we'll get to who we're praying to, the one here called Goddess Durga, right? And so durgāṃ devīṃ, right? So, and we are praying to her, and it says śaraṇamaham. Sharanam, we take shelter. Sharanam, sharanagata. Aham, I take shelter, right? So this is a very intimate prayer. I take shelter in you. In prapadye, at your feet, I take shelter surrendering to your feet. Falling at your feet, I take shelter. It's a very, I think, an emotional lot. To me, that line, there's other hymns where you find that line, right? Śaraṇamaham prapadye, I think there's a verse, and it's like, oh, I surrender myself at your feet. Śaraṇamaham prapadye, you'll find that line in other hymns. Śaraṇamaham prapadye. So we worship Durga. So why Durga? Of course, here, Durga has her own story. Then there's forms of the goddess as Ma Durga, who has her own leelas and how she got her name, right? There's stories of how she, by killing a demon called Durgāṃ, she became Durga Ma, right? The god Mother Durga who killed the demon Durga, right? That's how one of the ways traditionally she got her name. So here that story is not there. So why use this verse? So Durga is a epithet for the Devi being worshipped here, right? As here being used as an epithet or description of Bhuvaneshwari, or that as experience. Well, let's see what Durga's. So Durga, of course, the tantrics like to do means this and ram means this, and they do that type of esoteric understanding, but that's generally how it's understood. So duhu and gaha become Durga, right? So duhu means very difficult, right? A difficulty, right? And gaha is to go, right? Something like this. So one meaning of Durga is she who's difficult to attain. It's hard to get to Durga, right? Thus the term tapasā jvalantīṃ, she shines in pasya, right? It's not easy, right? But also one meaning has come from that. Many variations of that theme have come, that she who's difficult to attain, she who's difficult, she's Durga, right? So she's herself not an easy goddess, right? But she also destroys difficulty. She helps us overcome difficulty. She's not easy to get, but she's the one that overcomes difficulty, Durga, right? And so in one of the stories, there is a demon called Durgāṃ, and so she killed Durgāṃ. So, and that Durgāṃ's name means Durga, means difficult, right? Who she represents. You can see it is not, you don't have to jump too much in trying to find some symbolic meaning of Durgāṃ Asura is that he represents difficulties. And she, by killing him, and therefore gets his name, right? The one who destroys Durga, Dukkha. And if you have the word dukkha, I guess that's a cognate word, right? Dukkha in Buddhism, and dukkha means suffering, right? So she destroys suffering. So Durga, the destroyer of suffering, Durga, who's also difficult to attain, right? Thus needing some austerity. So let's look at the verse again here. Back and forth here. Durgam Devi Sharanam. So what is she? What is this goddess who helps us overcome difficulty? The difficult goddess to attain that helps us overcome difficulty. What is she specializing here? Why are we worshiping her? Right? Why are we going to her for refuge? Because the way he translates, hail to her, goddess Durga, Durgam Devi, Śaraṇamaham, I go for refuge, right? Prapadye doesn't mention her feet, but in the original it says at her feet, taking shelter at her feet. Sutarasi, tarase, sutarasi, tarase, namaḥ. I bow to her because of something. The way he's translated, and if you look at 10 different, I can tell you, if you look at 10 different translations, they'll have 10 different versions, ways of understanding this verse, because we just did that today, trying to pin it down a little bit, finding so much variety. I just have to admit that there's a variety of possible interpretations of tarasi, tarase, right? The way in our translation here is She is a raft of swift crossing. So actually the word repeated twice, tara and tara, sutarasi, so sutara and tarasi and tarase. Let me find my notes here and go back. And Swamiji helped me on that because I don't have enough, maybe none of us have enough Sanskrit knowledge to understand this, because I've looked at very qualified translators, right, looking at different verses, and they give slightly different versions of this, right? So I think there's some ambiguity, right? But we can generally approach it this way, right? Sutarasi, su means excellent, right? So sutarasi is, and tara means to, let's look at it. Su means excellent, and tara means to cross, right? So that's one meaning of tara, to cross, right? Or sometime to save, right? And so when you think, when like Ma Tara is the savior, one of the names of our Kali is Ma Bhavatarini, one who, the savior, the savioress of the world. She's Tara, she's helps Bhavatarini, she saves the universe, saves everyone, right? So that word Tarini is savioress, right? But saving from what? The word for save and the word for cross are the same, right? That means we have to cross something to be saved, right? And so this is bringing into this idea of samsara, right? A very classical Hindu idea of samsara, right? She saves from the ocean. Samsara, what is samsara? Samsara is our experience of phenomenal existence, right? If you want to keep expanding on it, it means the ocean, the sagara, samsara sagara, the ocean of samsara. And what are the waves of this ocean? So difficult to cross, is the ocean of birth and death, right? And of karma, right? We're constantly being born and dying, born and dying, born and dying, dying and being born, dying and being reborn, right? Wave after wave, and we never cross this ocean. We get caught in it. And a big part, and so when we think of, like what did it to be saved? Of course, different religions have different ideas, soteriological ideas of what salvation is. What is a spiritual end goal, a divine goal, right? Personal goal, right? To attain heaven, right, is one way of understanding, attain a heaven, right? And so some devotees of the goddess want to go beyond this world and enter her heaven of the jeweled island, the Manidweep, right? The highest heaven of the Devi, as per Devi Bhagavatam, right? Or go to Kailas, or go to Vaikunta, or go to our heaven, whatever the heaven of the religion is. That's one way. What does that mean? That means you're there in a divine realm. Paradise means, paradisha means the supreme land, right? Way better than the world of birth and death. That's of eternal birth, death, old age, disease, and suffering. Now let's get more specific, right? Actually, it's birth, disease, old age, within there suffering, death, and then rebirth of indeterminate nature. That's the world of samsara, right? Congratulations. This is where we like this, right? And so if this world of samsara is not if we're not satisfied with it, right? We want to go somewhere else, or maybe not use that language of something else somewhere else, right? One of our friend Krishna Mohan called that lollipop land religion. We want to go somewhere else, something else somewhere else. That he's being a little bit flippant, and that was his personality, and he was making a spiritual point, right? But still, we shouldn't dismiss, other people's goals as lollipop, as childish, right? It's just a different mythic understanding of and wording of the spiritual goal, different understanding of the spiritual end goal, right? So we can maybe we can think of it maybe more sophisticated by thinking, it means liberation. So liberation means freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from birth, old age, suffering, death, and rebirth of an indeterminate nature. That's what freedom. That's what mukti or moksha means, generally, right? So freedom crossing over the ocean. What ocean? The ocean of birth and death, the ocean of samsara, of phenomenal existence, right? And a lot of Indic traditions, including the tradition Devi Bhagavatam is coming from, is a way to overcome or to transcend or be free from, all these different ways to understand it, samsara, right? Be free from the changing, to find the eternal and be free from the changing. Or maybe not, maybe we don't use such a harsh language, such dualistic language, to find the eternal within the changing. And therefore the changing, if we have the eternal, the changing is not so painful, perhaps, not so confusing. When we find the essential, the non-essentials are not as confusing. When you don't have we don't know what the essence is, the essentials are completely bewildering, right? The non-essentials are completely bewildering if you don't know the essential. So there's different ways we can think of it, right? So she, Durga Devi, right, crosses over suffering. What is that suffering? In this verse, perhaps, the ocean of birth and death, right? Represented by a demon, how she got her name, of Durgāṃ, right? Or we know Durga kills many demons. She kills Mahishasura, right? The demon the gross demon will celebrate these scenes this coming Navaratri, where she kills Shumba Nishumba. She kills, which are very subtle psychological demons of ego and self-importance and pride and self-loathing. These profound, perhaps can be interpreted personally, very profound psychological scar is very close to our being, or Mahishasura being very gross, animalistic, lust and greed and selfishness, right? And what is it, Madhu and Kaitaba? There's so many demons, Raktabija, Durmalochana, Chandamunda, all these different demons. She kills those demons, right? Those demons could be seen a little psychologically, spiritually, as these the things that either aspects, we can project them outside as aspects of samsara, right? Or internally is the things that keep us bound to samsara, the internal qualities or lack of qualities, the vices or lack of virtues, right? And each of the names, like Durmalochana, smoke-eyed, right? And like the names are, you don't have to jump too far to try to guess a possible personal meaning for these names. These demons have very obvious, sometimes I think pretty obvious correspondences within our own psychology, the things that keep us bound, right? Our vices and lack of virtue, right? And so Devi, she saves, in the stories, she destroys them and saves the gods. Here, she's saving the gods by being born as Parvati eventually, and killing Tarakasura in this particular story. But personally also, what's the purpose of sadhana? To awaken, to purify our consciousness, to awaken our consciousness, and transform our consciousness, taking shelter of her who overcomes the sufferings of samsara. She crosses this, and she will save us, tada. She will save us by helping us cross, tada saving, tada crossing, both. Let's look at the verse again. It's a long verse, so my notes go over many pages, so I have to slide it here. So from what we understood, and Swamiji helped today, right? Tarasi means, Swamiji described it as for the other, right? It's what's you're better at these, what's the term?
Well, it's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible that this is the parasmaipada form.
Yeah.
Second person.
So
you who help others cross, who cross for the benefit of others.
Yeah, and you're very good at this. You're expert. You are you're excellent at helping other people cross. Right. So that's a very nice thing to say about the Divine Mother. She's very expert at helping people to cross. Right. So if we want our suffering to end, right, we take shelter at her feet, because she's expert at helping other people to cross. Why? because then the next sign is that's sutarasi, tarase. And tarase, Swamiji, is about one's, it's referring that she herself has crossed.
It's possibly, again, possibly could be interpreted as the same verb, but in you who cross, and this is the atmanepada, which is for one's own self.
Yeah. So we bow to you, we take shelter in you, because you're excellent at helping people to cross. Why? Because you yourself have crossed, right? So some have translated, like I said, if you take 10 different translations, this line gets translated in different ways, right? So some have said, oh, like, we go to you to cross because you're the bridge, right? Because you are the crossing, you yourself are the crossing, therefore you're very excellent at helping us to cross, therefore we go to you to cross, right? That type of like language, right? So the way Mackenzie Brown is translated here is that you are the raft, meaning I think the raft is the tarase, and of swift crossing is the tarasi, sutarasi, I think, right? That you are the bridge or the raft, right? That helps us to cross, right?
Because so, tarasa can also be translated as boat.
As boat. So actually, I've seen this verse. You'll also find it if you click around a little bit, research that you are the boat that gives us safe crossing, like that. We go to you because you're the boat, right? You're the boat that helps us cross, and that's a very common. This is a very common metaphor or example or of salvation in this Samsara type of tradition. A boat to cross the ocean, a bridge to cross, a forge to wade across, somebody who ferries us across, right? Krishna is the one who ferries us across the ocean of birth and death. There's lots of language like this, right? You are the hail to her great crossing. So already we have the purpose of that she is the color of fire, or has the quality of the fire of knowledge, omniscience, awareness, samvit, right? Consciousness, of purification, of action, of like that. She shines by tapasya, or she's awakened by tapasya or by sadhana, right? She's the purpose of all Vedic action, and by extension, maybe the purpose of all action, especially spiritual action, of all sadhana, karmā-phaleṣu, juṣṭām. We worship her, right? We awaken her for this. She's the reason, the goal, right? She is Durga, the one who overcomes, who's difficult to attain because she requires tapasya, but also she overcomes difficulties. And because of that, we take shelter at her feet, and she helps us cross. She is the bridge, she is the crossing, and she's excellent at helping us cross, right? Or helping us swim across, or walk across, or sail across, or wade across, whatever they fit in your example or metaphor here. Right. Let's see.
Also,
yes, Swamiji.
tarasa. So tarasa can have the sense of, like you were just saying, of a very fast, quickly. So it's all of these, kind of merge together.
And also, let's because these verses are found in texts outside Devi Gita, and they're being quoted by Devi Gita, right? So we have to think why they're being quoted. One reason they're being quoted is they're using Vedic mantras, right? As an author, an external author to the text would want to have Vedic mantras to give the goddess a Vedic pedigree. We've talked about that, right? Within the story, the gods are chanting because these are the mantras. They know Vedic mantras. They're the gods, right? And they're chanting the mantras they themselves know, right? And so that's another thing, right? But let's keep it close to the story, right? They went to her because they were suffering. They were a sati disappeared. Shiva went off to meditate, right? All subhagya, if you remember back to our early discussions, the all auspiciousness seemed to have leave the world. The planets retrograded, right? Everything was inauspicious, right? Joy shriveled in the hearts of men, to use something that could be out of a Lord of the Rings type of intro or something like that. It's one of these, and great evil was seen lurking, unseen, right? And a great demon woke up, right? And that demon, Tarakasura, right? He had a boon that nobody can kill him, right? Nobody can kill him except the legitimate son of Shiva. Shiva doesn't have a wife, or to speak of a son, therefore he's safe. And with that power of not seemingly near invincibility, right? He took over the hellish realms easy enough. He took over the human realms really easy. We, just like in the Lord of the Rings, the men fall easily. In the Lord of the Rings also, they fell faster than the other categories of beings. And we're watching a Lord of the Rings episode recently, so it's in our minds like that. The imagery is very effective, right? And then they attacked the gods, and the gods couldn't defeat them, and the gods were kicked out of heaven and wandering the world with no place to live, no place to hide, right? So then they go to Vishnu. Vishnu tells them, why are you suffering? Don't you know that the Divine Mother herself, Bhuvaneshwari, is right here? She lives in Manidweep, which is everywhere and is the highest heaven, and she's a wish-fulfilling tree. Just go to her, right? And she'll solve our problem. Your suffering. She's Durga. She removes difficulty, right? And they do. What do? Tapasā jvalantīṃ. They awaken her with tapasya through their sadhana, right? And then those qualities, tām-agni-varṇāṃ, right? These qualities of Agni, light, purification, awareness, all these divine qualities associated with the sun, associated with fire and the sun. Vairovcanīṃ is the sun. The purpose of everything. She's now appeared. She's appeared. Why? To end their suffering. She's appeared to take them safely across this ocean. Their suffering, their samsara. Our samsara may be all guna. We all have our personal samsara we have to deal with, right? Besides general definition, they had their own suffering. This particular demon had taken over. We have our suffering, right? Birth, death, old age, disease, and everything in between. All the struggles in seemingly consciously separation from God. Very difficult situation where we seem to find ourselves in. But she's everywhere, like fire. She's everywhere. She can be awakened, brought up. And by taking shelter in her, she can take us across this ocean, right? End our suffering, just like she's about to do for the gods. When they do her prayers, in a few weeks, we'll finish the set of prayers. And then she'll ask, I'm pleased with you. I am a wish-fulfilling tree. Ask what you want. And he says, we are suffering, right? Remove this, please do something to kill this demon, to remove this demon. She agrees to be born. And then but then it's not enough, because that's not the real suffering isn't that a demon is taken over, right? The demon is taken over is a symptom of the real suffering. The real cause of suffering is spiritual ignorance, is disconnection from her, right? Not being aware of her. And therefore they ask the real boon, the real thing to take us across this ocean of birth and death is not just the death, the removing of the killing of a demon, or psychologically some internal quality or negative quality or lack of a positive quality, wherever you want to stand that demon, right? It's ontological. We are separated from, we don't know the truth, and we're separated, seemingly at least, because it's only not knowing, it's not actually, right? We don't know of our union with her. That's the real goal. So this verse, I believe, is how we've always massage this verse in our mind as we think of this verse, right? I've thought of this verse over many years, and it's come to me for different purposes, right? And there's different ways to approach it, and like this. But this is my basic understanding, that this is dealing with a very profound, deep. It's not just, you're the one we worship, you're the one we want, right? You're awakened by, but it's not just our suffering, it's the root cause of our suffering. Spiritual ignorance is the root cause of our suffering. In Jnana tradition, we say spiritual ignorance. Bhakti tradition is separation, or forgetfulness of God, right? Closeness of pure. And so our Guruji always said that the purification of the mind and purification of the heart are actually the same thing. Just seeing from different angles, right? Or the awakening, or the unfolding, or the blooming of the mind, or of consciousness, or of the heart, are also the same thing, seen from two different sides. So one last thing I want to, because and if you, I don't know if you caught it, there's a footnote, a brief footnote on this verse that describes, and this is a tendency of Tantra, right, to find hidden meanings, esoteric, occult meanings to verses. So last week we kind of did that a little bit. All these 5 names really mean the 5 powers of Ishvara, right? That's how we approached it last week. So this has an esoteric interpretation, and he quotes Nilakanta. In the footnote, Professor Mackenzie Brown briefly quotes Nilakanta, which is our classical commentator on the Devi Bhagavatam and Devi Gita, right? And he quotes from the Prapanchasara Tantra, and this is a text that he occasionally quotes from, and I've quoted a few things from it also, kind of illustrating kind of the tantric interpretation of these verses, right? So think about, and the common thing in Tantra is every word really means a letter, and that letter really there's a hidden letter that means something different. So let's see from that perspective. So there's a couple main characters in this. There is main themes. There is Agni, tām-agni, right? Tām-agni. Agni means fire, right? There is the sound of fire. The bij mantra of fire is Ram. Every element, earth, fire, water, air, ether, Ram, Lam, Vam, Yam, Hum. Each one has a mantra, a bij mantra, a essential sound, a foundational sound that's more fire than fire. The essence of fire is the vibration of fire, not the thing combusting and burning something and converting energy to light and heat, right? Matter to light and heat. That's not what's the real fire is represented by the sun, Ram. So Ram, the essential letter of Ram is Ra, R. Well, we have, so that's tām-agni-varṇāṃ tapasā. Tapasya is austerity, right? So he quotes, right? Actually, he quotes later, not here, right? He quote Nilakanta in commenting on another verse, 4 or 5 verses down the line, right? He's going to try to justify, because there's the goddess. There's a verse that describes a goddess as water, as fire, as all kinds of different things, including Maya, right? So where is Brahman? So there's a term. He quotes a verse from the Mukunda Upanishad as he interprets it, to say that tapas, right? The word tapas also means, from the Upanishad, Maya, right? So that's and there's a rationale for that we won't go into. It's a little too maybe when we get to those verses, maybe we can take time we lost today and add it to those verses and describe his justification for this, right? So Maya, tapas means Maya. Maya, there is a essential sound of Maya, a feminine sound, E, a long I, right? Then you have the word vairovcanīṃ. Vairovcanīṃ is a name for the sun, right? The sun has a bij mantra, Hum. Hum and Tum, sun and moon, right? So Hum, the essential sound of Hum, is Ha, right? So now we have, and then you have within the sun, just like when you worship the sun, you're not just worshiping the sun, you're worshiping the Devi of the sun, hidden within the sun, the essential nature of the sun. It's not just light, it's the light of life beyond all darkness, right? It's the Isha Upanishad says, in front of the disk of the sun, there's the real sun, or maybe some Upanishad said, maybe Isha Upanishad, hopeless Isha Upanishad, right? It says that beyond the sun, there's the real sun. Behind Savitri, so in the Shakti tradition, we say beyond Savitur is Savitri. There's the goddess behind the image of the sun, something like that. So the sovereign power, the essential power within the sun, is the M with a dot, the Chandra Bindu, right? That's a sound, the essential sound within everything, including within the sun. So now we have Agni, tapas, vairovcanīṃ, avirochana, and the sovereign hidden secret power, right? You have R, Ra, E, right? Ha, and right? You rearrange those because everything is rearranged in secret, Then we have this, instead of R, I, H, M, let's rearrange it to H, R, I, M. Hrim, right? Right. So all this is encoded, and this is a big theme in tantric interpretation. Tantra is also esoteric and occult tradition, right? There's hidden meanings that are not obvious. You wouldn't see them unless you knew how to look for them, or if somebody who knew them would tell you, right? And so I cannot say that I figured this out myself. This is in the commentaries, right? But this is and the footnote here, I would have missed it. Although years ago when I spoke in this verse, I remember having fun because a lot of the verses, almost every verse in the Chandi has been interpreted this way, right? Where every verse is some bij mantra and some essential meaning. So here, how do you take Hrim, the Hirleka mantra, which is what the gods were worshiping on, were meditating. They meditate. Remember, we have a whole lecture. They meditate on the Hirleka mantra. One of our talks on this, when they were doing sadhana, they did many sadhanas, but essentially they meditate on Hirleka, the Hrim mantra, or the Maya bij, or the Bhuvaneshwari bij. This is the mantra, the seed sound by which all Bhuvaneshwari's puja can be done. This is her essential sound, more important than Om. This is her Omkara. This is her Pranava. Right. This is justified also because 3-4 verses later, you can, if you have the book, you can look a few verses later at the end of the prayers. It's all about the final prayer is you are the mantra Hrim, right? Directly states it, right? That this is this is setting it up perhaps the way Nilakanta understood it and from this tantric tradition to understand it. So taking refuge in Durga, the durgāṃ devīṃ śaraṇamaham prapadye, how do you do that? Well, we have our devotional methods, we have our different types of sadhana, but from this interpretation is by taking refuge in, and how do you do that? By meditating upon the Hirleka mantra, into her beach mantra. By japa and meditation of her mantra, the mantra Bhuvaneshwari is the way that you take shelter in Durga, the way you cross this ocean, the mantra of Durga, of Bhuvaneshwari Hrim, Maya Bija is the bridge. That is the bridge that crosses the ocean, right? And that gives good crossing, right? That is the power. That is the she shines. What is tām-agni-varṇāṃ, tapasā, jvalantīṃ, vairovcanīṃ? That is either all qualities of Bhuvaneshwari's bij mantra, right? This gets into nice sonic theology and tantric theology, but so I think we are at our end here. Let's look up tām-agni-varṇāṃ, tapasā, jvalantīṃ, vairovcanīṃ, karmā-phaleṣu, juṣṭām, durgāṃ devīṃ, śaraṇamaham, prapadye, sutarasi, tarase, namaḥ. Right? To her, the color of fire, blazing like the sun with ascetic power, and who is worshipped for attaining the fruits of actions. To her, the goddess Durga, I go for refuge. Hail to the raft of swift crossing. Right? Another translation, just to give you a different flavor of translation, she who has the color of fire, effulging with the power of tapas blazing, the one who is desired in the fruits of all action. I take refuge in her, the goddess Durga, reverence to the wonderful savioress for our deliverance. Right. So there's so many translations we can give, different wordings of it. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thank you for your kind attention. Are there any questions or comments? I apologize for our glitch today. Technical difficulties. Om, om, om. Om, 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 om. Anything? Nothing. That's good. I think it's good. I don't know if it's good or not, but so yesterday it was Swami Lakshmanju's Mahasamadhi, right? His passing away day. And Swami Lakshmanju, many of you may know, though some of you may not know, was a great Many consider the last great living, for his generation at least, a master of Kashmir Shaivism, unique soul for sure of an ancient tradition. And I unfortunately never got a chance to meet him. I came just too late to Kali Mandir. Usha was very lucky and to have had his company and his darshan many times, and more connection to him. But one of the great minds, a great scholar and lineage holder of the Kashmir tradition of Abhinavagupta, as well as an illumined saint, from what we could, from all any way we can judge. He was a great saint and a great scholar and a great teacher. And so it was his passing, his anniversary of his passing. And because he's a householder, he was not a householder, but he wasn't, and he did take sannyas at the end of his life symbolically, right? But because of he's not officially a sannyasi in the normal way, right? Not only do you celebrate, you'd have to celebrate the day of the guru passes, but then there's a yearly celebration that happens during the Pitru Paksha, the period called there's a 2-week period that we're in now, right? That like if your mother or father died on Panchami, the 5th day of whatever year or month that they were in, on Panchami, they're in this 2 weeks. You're supposed to do ceremonies for them, right? And so in the Kashmiri tradition, they would do the ceremonies twice, the anniversary of the day, and then also the anniversary during this period, right? And so it says Swami Lakshmanji chose this day so that his disciples wouldn't have to do this difficult and expensive practice twice a year, because they'd have to do it twice. Like he used to do it twice a year for his guru, right? But he died he left his body during Pitru Paksha, right? So the same day is there. So that means we're in Pitru Paksha. That's another point you can just end note, is that this 2 weeks is a very auspicious time to honor, feed and worship and your ancestors, especially those who most recently passed. But your ancestors, you really go back 10 generations in the Hindu tradition, right? And if you know the day, if you can look at the date, you can find on calendar there's a way to figure it out. If you need help, it can also help you what the tithi of their passing is, and then you can do it on that day of these 2 weeks or any day. But especially if you don't know the day, or you missed it, or you can't manage it, on Amavasya, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, I guess, must be not this Sunday, or not next Sunday, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, I think. Amavasya is called Mahalaya Amavasya. And
25th.
Mahalaya, what's that, Swamiji?
25th.
25th. That's Sunday?
Yes.
In my mind, I can see it on the calendar on Sunday, but not the date. So that is a day that if you don't know which day somebody passed away, you can worship or make food offerings or offerings on that day. Especially auspicious is right at sunrise on that day. That's so you can do it's a simple practice if you want to. You can do a water offering with sesame seeds, or you can take sesame seeds in your hand with water, or if you have a little copper cup or copper spoon or something, we use it that way. And with the raising sun, remembering those who've passed away, you can make offerings for their benefit. Offering water and sesame seeds, that's the essential offering, but there's also other things you can do. Here at Kali Mandir, we have Kali Puja that day, it's Amavasya, and then we offer the first plate of prasad to the ancestors, as well as pindas, which are balls made of rice and sesame seeds, and water offering, remembering all the ancestors, right? Our own, as well as everybody present and everybody not present, all the devotees, including all you, right? That we will, if you're all mentally, you can pray that they're satisfied that they get Ma's Prasadam. It's said on that day that the ancestors line up in rows to be fed, like a bandara, like a. Have you ever been to a Sunday feast at Hare Krishna Temple? People line up in rows and they feed, right? So they line up to accept our food and offerings, right? And whether that's true or not, we believe it's true, and the Garuda text like Garuda Purana will describe the benefits, the importance of the yearly offering during this time. of the pindas and Shraddha ceremony, Shraddha offerings, at different stages, year after year, different stages where our ancestors go before returning or moving on, or our feeding benefits them, right? That's a old traditional Puranic understanding, right? Another understanding we can also do, and Swami Lakshmanji also gave this understanding, so it's fresh in my mind. He says, even if maybe those offerings aren't essential, but the soul knows that my descendants, look how nicely they're trying to observe all the rites properly for me, right? And therefore it makes a loving connection, right? And with our departed ancestors, a loving connection is all we got. We have loving memories and our connection to them, right? And so wherever they are, right, if they're conscious or if they're not conscious, we are doing our part to act responsibly and do our duty to serve them, right, in our small way. We serve them best by living good lives and making them proud, right? But also it is our duty also, especially in the Hindu tradition, to feed them and offer pindas and water and food on that day. So if you don't, this whole 2 weeks is very auspicious. If you want to do prayers for them, remembering them, especially on Amavasya. So, and if you can't do it, or even if you do it, we will also do it for you here at Kali Mandir, and we'll broadcast. So there'll be a point, and you can also, when I ask everybody, please remember as many of your maternal and paternal ancestors that you can remember, right? That's an important thing. You should remember their names, right? But we don't even remember. I don't remember my I don't remember my great grandparents' names, right? It's pretty bad that we don't remember, but we should remember, not forget. All right, Jai Ma, all blessings. Good night, everyone. Jai Ma. Next week we'll do, I think the following week we may have to take a break because of Navaratri. I'm not sure. I have to look at the calendar a little carefully, but I'm not sure if we can get away in the middle of just all the ritual preparations like that. But next week I think we're still clean. So we'll continue next week. Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Om. Om, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Durga Dasi.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma, Sema. So Navaratri is also the due date.
Yeah.
Right. So which day is the due date?
The 29th.
The 29th. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Pray for us.
Yeah.
At present, I'm praying to you. Your image is my mother right now, but I'll switch to praying for you momentarily soon as you get closer. You're probably not comfortable, but you're okay.
I'm okay. Yeah, definitely not comfortable, but doing okay and just enjoying the last few days or however long we have left with this phase.
Jai Ma, Jai Ma. All blessings.
Thank
Jai
you.
Ma. We'll talk soon. Jai Ma, Jai Ma.
Yes, Jai Ma.